Those who think anew are true artists, part 2. If you had that sort of, to give us some different basis, let's call it artistic intelligence for a little while tonight. You know what I mean, don't you? It's the same thing I mean by all that other stuff. Of more universal, more complex, more enriched intelligence. Revolutionary intelligence, exploratory intelligence, but since I was using a line about artistes, consider it this way. That from a more artistic viewpoint, to think anew entails this, that you see for yourself, that you experience the fact that there is no such thing as irrelevant information, jejune communications, useless illusions, not illusions, illusions. That is, that all forms that would apparently be moving energy, but at a verbal level, of course, apparently moving a message, a statement, something that is put into words. A more universal, artistic outlook in life would be that there is no such thing as useless communications going on. And I do not mean just between humans. I mean the kinds of things that are always being broadcast, that even if you are an absolute firm secondary fan of Baroque music, if you wait until the time that they're sometime during the day, the romantic hour, you can get something. Or if you're absolutely in love with abstract expressionism, then there's something to be learned from postmodern. Don't make me push that any further. Everything that is being communicated, and I'm trying to get you to see more specifically now, I'm not just talking about some sort of crude 1960s hippie, I'm in love with trees and moonbeams are talking to me and I believe I just heard a clover go psst. I'll assume that you people have quit smoking those kinds of substances. As beautiful as the non-sentient universe may be, right now I'm talking about that seems to be, by all accounts and by all your experience, would seem to be the kind of information that would be of singular, specific interest to humans. The sounds of warfare over that little knoll, in history. The sound of one human speaking to you. The sounds of large mobs screaming. The sound of words jumping off the paper. The sound, if you get better at realizing, it's your own brain chemistry taking the stimuli of all those little dots, and something is springing up and talking. There is no such thing, from a more artistic, from a more revolutionary view, there is no such thing as absolutely impotent, useless, barren communication going on. No matter what is said, no matter what information, no matter what communication seems to be going on in the sensual universe, no matter how insignificant to you, which is not in question right now because everything that is communicated is not necessarily of any specific importance to you on the surface, sensually. That is, it may not have apparently any immediate effect upon your primary level of staying alive. It may not even have any immediate apparent impact on your secondary interest, your hobbies. But even at that level, even if its import would seem to be minuscule in your case, it always alludes to something else. Always. That is why, from a more revolutionary chemical view, I keep saying that you can take it metaphorically. All you people from Metaphorial. That's a weird planet, but I know some of you got stuck here. But it is more than metaphorical. It is not to end any sentence, because what you have done is gone through that same tempo. You have gone ahead with a score that is chopping up the music into preset measures to which you're already accustomed. It is thinking in the little spurts, in the little blitz, in the little bites. And it's like a little line of poetry, like a line out of a song, a limerick, to-do, 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 to-do. I'll do a long one. To-do, 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 to-do. All right, now that's the kind of thing that you just about figured out the nature of life. But in most cases, all you got to do is think, do-do. Now you hear somebody else go, do-do, 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 do. And you think about it and you think, do-do. You know. Or do-do. It is to break away, even if it apparently is a message, a communication of some kind. At the verbal level now, we're always speaking of energy, but at what seems to be the verbal level of the communication of human energies. Even if it apparently has no significance, or even if apparently it repels you, if it makes you hostile. But the worst is, it's just of no interest from a revolutionary view. It is only to ordinary intelligence that is the extent of it. If somebody says, hey, be sure they've changed one of the stations over up about 1340 on the dial, and they're now playing classical country. Now, if you've got no interest, you can say, well, that tells me nothing. But it alludes to something else. Always. The mention of anything at the human level incidentally mentions something else. I was not really going into this. I'll just throw it out. Some of you could even look at a sort of a particular side trail that another oral picture of the evolution of human intellect could be seen as going from, in your case, in your own nervous system, and over what appears to be a more institutionalized history of man, of it going from questions within man's nervous system. There's a kind of returning of its own energy of such things as, is there really an absolute difference between good and evil? You can look at it as being a kind of evolution from that. Some of it, I'll admit, is more represented perhaps in classical, that is, academic philosophy, but you should be able to follow what I'm saying. Going from questions that you may have in the little nipper part of your nervous system, in the nipper part of the institutionalized part of human evolution, of such things as, is there really an absolute difference between good and evil? Into questions such as, the response to that question being, well, what do you mean by absolute? Back to the subject. That is what I'm talking about in another way, though. Everything that is said is an indirect mention of something else. No end to a tapestry. There is no period to any sentence. Local reality, from a more enriched view, is not an illusion in the sense that it is some trick or that humans are too stupid to see it. It is an illusion in the sense that all that can be seen by the senses is not all there is. So in that sense, it is a delusion. It is a pictorial illusion. It is an intellectual trompe-l'oeil. And yet, if you can hear, see, I'll let you work on feel, taste, and smell. If you can intellectualize the information, even if it appears to be of no consequence, of no interest, it always indirectly comments on something else. Now, once you begin to use this in a certain way, it creates a new definition of the obvious. It's like an area of trans-obviousness, because to ordinary intelligence it is not obvious. If somebody says, you ought to be sure and check out 1340 because they've switched over to classical country. You got no interest, not only in classical country, perhaps in music. But it indicates something else. It is also a comment about something else. To ordinary intelligence, it is not. To ordinary intelligence, if you say, what was the purpose of that piece of information? Ordinary intelligence say, what? What was the purpose of that fellow telling you that 1340 now plays classical country? What the hell do you think's the point? I mean, he told me that on 1340 that they now play classical country. What's the point? It would be obvious, correct? Everything, at least indirectly, comments on something else. So that there is never a final play. There is never the last out. You do not come to the end of your rope. You do not come to the final brick in the driveway. You do not come to the final place that your neurons speak to one another. Ultimately, anything indirectly comments on everything. But I'll grant you that perhaps intellectually to start with is just see for yourself that whatever piece of information, if it's just floating through your own nervous system, apparently you were just sitting there just daydreaming or talking back to the television, talking to a tree. Even if it apparently comes out of your own nervous system, out of your own brain, out of your own dialogue, and seems to be nothing, it indirectly is commenting on something else. And for those of you getting this on tape at another time, another place, in case you have any doubt, let me clear it up. I'm not referring to subconscious messages. No. It's just simply because a subconscious message, being that kind of idea, I would suggest to you, is a fairly crude reflection that life is allowed loose on this planet, but is connected to what I'm saying. But it is a crude, it is a useless, and it is a one-dimensional idea, because the way it is perceived by ordinary, sophisticated, psychologically learned or aware people nowadays is, if I said that every comment alludes to something else, and ordinary intelligence says, well, you mean it's everything or some things have a subconscious message going along with it, even if they don't know what the message is. The way it's thought about now, the way it's been implanted in the general wiring system of humans, is that this subconscious, this rider, this piggyback message, if there is such a thing, would be specific. Yeah. We just don't know what it is. It'd probably take years of analysis, but the message is, the person said, be sure and check over at that radio station 1340, they've changed their format. That could mean that that person is making a homosexual advance toward you. Or it could be that you remind that person of their dead uncle that they always wanted to thank for nicknaming them nickname. The thought is that there would be a specific message. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it indirectly comments on something else. But I didn't say a specific something else, because there's not. And you should be able to piece that together if you were listening, because I followed that up by saying that ultimately any little thing makes an indirect comment on everything. But it's not some specific, subconscious, subliminal, unstated message. It is just what I said, that everything is making an indirect, incidental comment on something else. Something's else. There are patterns amidst the chaos. There are specific, unadorned messages amongst the conditioned local generalities. But with ordinary intelligence, that is thinking in sentences, thinking in the tempo of your own nervous system, they cannot be seen. But that which would appear to be absolute chaos, which would be to the human intellect, especially at the apparent human level, not just the mathematical or the scientific or the biological, but what would appear to be in the flow of human events and social intercourse. Chaos would be the useless carried to a dazzling extreme. Even though people, I don't guess, use the term much amongst themselves socially. They might say it was a bad party last night or it got out of hand, but I don't guess people normally say, I found myself in the midst of alcohol-induced, institutionalized chaos over at Herb's house last night. But there does appear to be, on the level that the intellect must bring things to, there appears to be a continual flow of chaos. But rather than being confronted in some way, life is wired up through humans to localize it, so that the chaos always seems to be just out of reach of my two empty arms. Well, that was Brooke Benton. Seems to be just in the periphery. It's just right around the corner, just above the horizon of your particular planet. But it does happen that people seem to, periodically, to no great normal adverse effect to themselves, get little glimpses. Sometimes it happens when they're drinking, sometimes it happens under drugs, sometimes it happens when people are very ill. It can happen during a time of a shock. That people almost look around, and it's like this. Don't take this as being a statement of reality, but it would be like just glancing around, and it's just chaos right over their shoulder, just around somewhere. It would be like, I'm not trying to make it sound weird, but it would be like any of you who have ever really feared for a few moments or a few hours that you might be dying. Or even if it was just a split second that you crossed an intersection and a car flew by, and it just seems to be a miracle. You're not even sure what happened. As fast as you spun the wheel and hit your brakes, and it was just like that you were almost dead, and it was all over, and you weren't dead. And it's not a theoretical, it's not simply an intellectual of, my God, the world's coming to loose ends and what's wrong with people. It's non-verbal, but it's just a feeling that I am surrounded. It's just always just a little bit out of sight of absolute chaos. I've put it to you another way in the past. It's not supposed to make anyone have the blues or be pessimistic, but I've said in a certain way, rather than feel like that life is coming apart, you could look at it fairly intellectually as a stable picture just to get you started to look around, and you should be able to see the connectedness of everything coming on something else, to see that rather than life coming apart, not just biologically, or this frail planet. I still like that one. I just saw a headline on the way over here on some magazine. Can man save this fragile planet? And it was that shot from the moon or somewhere of the planet Earth. You know, all you can see is the clouds and the sky. You don't see any humans, but is it too late for man to save this fragile planet? Do any of you think that when we're not looking, planet Earth is pacing the floor and wringing its hands thinking, what are these people doing to me? They're driving me nuts. Right. At any rate, where was I? Oh, I was right here. I pointed out that rather than things coming apart, that there was a way, just right quick, because many of you have heard it, that you should be able to look around and consider in a sense that it's a small miracle that you can get up in the morning, get in your car, drive down the street, not be killed, not hit somebody. We'll blame it on them, of course, it's that you don't hit anybody either, that you can actually go 2 blocks away, pull in at the post office, go and actually get your key out and stick it in your box and open it without breaking your wrist, or without getting in the wrong box, without stepping on somebody, without somebody walking up to you and saying, "Ha! You know, you've destroyed my life for the last time," and try to stab you. Or to walk up to the counter and say, "Could I have a roll of stamps?" And the person says, "Certainly." And get it out and hand it to you, and you give them the money, they give you change, and they say thank you, and you say thank you, and you leave. That's a small miracle. Not really, but you follow why I'm saying it. rather than look at things falling apart, it's almost a small miracle that you can do such as that. Of course, anybody that has any kind of universal, more enriched view, it's not. Things are not falling apart, and it's not a miracle that you can go do that. It is that you're living in the midst of a vivus machina. You're living in the midst of something that's alive from top to bottom. Your key, your post office box, your imagination, your fear, what I just said, what you just thought I said, what you heard, what I thought you said you heard. But to have localized intelligence, to be weighted down by the gravity of one planet's reality, as you're supposed to be, you take it all personally. Not just personally that I've been hurt, or my key broke off, or somebody did try to stab me. You take it personally in that, all right, let me write all this down or decide I'm going to get up again tomorrow. Tomorrow will be Thursday. I want tomorrow to be Thursday since it is, so I will get up Thursday morning, and I will get up at 6:45. I always get up, I'll get up at 6:45. I will turn off the clock, I will get up, and I will put on my clothes, and blah, blah, blah. You do not, of course, have time, nor the inclination, thank God, to plan your life in such a way beforehand. And you do not think about it that way. But at the ends of sentences, at times that chaos, or at least disruption, seems to be nipping at your little Achilles parts, the feeling is already wired in, the belief is, the thinking is, that we are in some way, somehow responsible. We're at least participating. We're ad-libbing some of our lines. We wander around from stage right to stage left and nothing's going on. Be that as it may, you're in the midst of a playhouse that is alive. And you can believe, you can think that you are ad-libbing, that there is some room for improvisation. But the whole place is alive. It is therefore that I speak of chaos, because the parts that actors, the parts that ordinary intelligence does not see as being alive to you at that time, if you did look off, they would range from being irrelevant, which is the normal way I put it to you, that everything that you're not wired up, that's not part of your primary need to live, and it's not part of your general wiring system to be of secondary interest, your avocations, the rest of it's irrelevant, if not annoying, such as other people's hobbies. Try to go to the post office and buy some stamps, and there's some dumb bastard in front of you wasting time buying stamps that he's not going to use. He collects them. It's his hobby. Jesus Christ, give me a break. Why don't the guy do something good like collect, use tires like I do? So it ranges from apparently being irrelevant to what I'm saying you would be a more universal description of it, is everything with outside the realm of your wiring system, your interest, to get a good view of it. It's chaos. It makes no sense. Why in the world would anybody spend their money, collect stamps? I mean, tires, you can play with them. You can change them. But stamps, you look at them, you put them in your book, and you sit there and you look, well, I got that one. Now, it seems to be relatively harmless, perhaps, but do you hear, in a sense, that is a sign of chaos? That, to you it makes no rhyme, no reason. There is no degree of sanity behind such an activity. Suffice my examples. A more universal intelligence sees that there is order, there are absolute patterns amidst the chaos. I can bring it more down to earth that there is always knowledge amongst all ignorance, which is not as self-evident as some of you might think, because the opposite is just as self-evident on this planet. But that's too far off the track again tonight, isn't it? Yes, thanks. But that which appears to be chaotic, that which appeared to be relevant to ordinary intelligence, has within it absolute patterns, distinct messages of relevance. There are patterns that you can see. Of course, some of you, I guess, read enough. One reason I brought up chaos again is now started out as a mathematical area of them taking equations that were representational of occurrences in the external world that appeared to be actually chaotic, flows of weather systems, etc. And then they ran the equations after they set up a program into computers that would print out, and it was putting out printouts, assuming that you have an artistic turn of mind, and you could say that thankfully, if you consider it thankfully, that some scientists and mathematicians doing this, somebody somewhere did, because they looked at it and went, well, Pollock may be dead, but this ain't bad. The point is, they began to see that the equations representing chaos, that they could find and they still can't predict the weather. So that you weather forecasters don't write me when I make crude jokes, because it's not a joke at weather forecasters. The reason I bring up such as that, let's really get off the subject, all right? Okay. It's again the way life works. No need to be a smartass. But it is part of the way life works that they devote large segments of the news locally, sometimes on these national news programs, to the weather. And it's not simply a laugh that, well, as it turns out, every year or so out in Iowa or Nebraska, somebody goes to their local station or writes their local newspaper and says that their cow can predict the weather better than the U.S. weather system. And every year, at least once a year, I read about it, some TV station or some paper will take the farmer up on it, and sure enough, they'll track that the farmer says, my cow wags his tail to the left when it's going to rain. When he raises one ear up and the temperature is going to drop. So they track it for a couple of weeks, and sure enough, the cow does better than all of the facilities of the U.S., whatever their weather bureau, whatever department that is. The point being that life continues this, and people do it, and the weather forecasters, they're the first ones that will tell you that people know what they're doing, is that it is such a delicate, it is such an imprecise art. I guess some of them might choke to say science. Does anybody remember some of my stories from years ago about the guy that went off to Australia and his girlfriend was waiting back here, and one day he decided to go to a church or a temple or somewhere? Does anybody remember that old story that I made up went on for a page or so? And how on the way to the church he ran to a mailman, and the whole thing was lost and it got real complicated. But it was something happening on the other side of the world ended up causing someone over here for their life to come apart. They apparently had no relationship. Now, even in weather forecasting, as in ecology now, is some of that kind of information that life keeps letting slip out, and it seems to have some local significance. They will latch on to it. That those involved with weather forecasting will latch on. It's not an excuse. The first time they started doing it, had we been standing around and had we no more than ordinary sarcastic intellects, we'd have went, boy, aren't you glad you finally came up with a goddamn excuse? Now you've got some scientist somewhere who's written a paper pointing out that just a change in the mating habits of fish in a certain area of the sea somewhere can change the temperature in such a way, unexpectedly, they just suddenly showed up, that within hours, the temperatures of water, they know for a fact now under many cases, will have an almost immediate effect upon the weather. But for a while, that's fairly new for them really knowing that scientifically, that it can change what was a fairly valid weather forecast 3 hours ago. That it did turn cold and rain when they were predicting that this high pressure is going to stay right over here and it's going to be clear and the temperature shouldn't change much. And some guy pointed out, he'd done several experiments or some observations, that an unusual, an unexpected arrival of a school of fish over here 5 hours ago changed the weather. The weather forecasters went, aha! Because they knew that the basis of the information they had up until then should be giving more reliable results. That is, it was local information. Now this is almost a pun, because it's true out there and it's true metaphorically, what I'm speaking of. That it was local information, and it seemed to be valid, that based upon everything they had known, and the meteorology had moved along to the point that 20 years ago, I guess you could get a degree in it, so it was academically considered to be at least a sincere, serious discipline. And yet everything they knew locally that they would predict, all right, in this area, such and such should happen within the next 12 hours. And that went on for years and years. And you should know by now. You can turn on the TV or the radio and they'll say this is what's going to happen for 12 hours. And 2 hours later you can walk outside and the whole weather forecast is shot to hell. Everything that happens indirectly comments on something else. Local information is always disappointing if you begin to expand your area of interest. Now this is true even out in the ordinary world, such as people now do have more interest. At one time, weather forecasting amounted to, if there was a cow that had a reputation, a farmer nearby would say, what does your cow say is going to be the weather? But he was talking about the weather right here. People living out in Minnesota and Montana, there they were. They had a wagon with 3 wheels. They had $5. They're not going anywhere, but nowadays, if you don't know the weather, you might be hopping on a plane tonight, take the Concorde that you got business tomorrow in Paris, and just out of fun, you might want to call the Weather Bureau, and now you won't, that is, your horizons, your interests have expanded, you won't know what the weather's going to be like in Europe tomorrow, specifically around Paris. So that you'd like to know because you might stick in another raincoat. As long as your interest, as long as your intelligence is held to a local area, I can put it all sorts of ways, you're always disappointed. There is no predicting. Everything is a weather forecaster. Let me even make it cruder. Everything, all predictions, all wisdom is a weather forecaster giving you investment advice, playing economist. Does that about cover it? That's a pretty good combination. A weather forecaster playing economist who casts horoscopes on the side. Now that about wraps it up. And of course I am not simply referring to out there. I'm referring to in here, of the energy flowing through you that's available to ordinary consciousness for you to try to predict what you'll do, for you to try to predict what everybody else will do, for you to be held by local reality, by local information, for you to take that which would seem to be locally obvious, as the weather forecasters can. They can take all the information, they got all the equipment, technology, in one sense, is not the problem anymore. They're one of the ones, they're past the point, not really, but I've heard some of them say that they're past the point of having the same kind of problems that physicists have, for instance. Because they say they've gotten enough equipment, technology now, to take all the measurements. What they don't yet see is they cannot take enough measurements outside their locality. That is, they cannot take enough measurements, they don't know where to look, it's just impossible to measure, to be aware not just of water temperature, not just of the rainfall recently, not just of the ground temperature, but they would have to take into consideration and have some kind of technology to be telling them the movements of all fishes, the dumping of garbage at sea, of anything changing temperatures. I'm just picking out one of the oceans. And they'd also be having to find out how fast forests are being cut down in certain areas of the world today, because that's going to affect it. But they've got enough technology that they can take in the information that seemed to be, in the last 20 years, up until recently, would seem to be adequate information locally. But as I said, life lets this information go out because things do, even mechanically, at the ordinary level, expand. And now they realize more and more, it's not absolute now, that local conditions are not going to produce the weather. In the same way that the so-called science of ecology, that they understand now that you cannot just go out and burn down 1 million acres of trees over here, and it's your trees and it's not going to affect you. It's not going to destroy the planet, but it can affect you personally, and it can affect somebody else. It is simply an expansion of understanding that there is a food chain, it's an energy chain. You personally, to be a real artist, you have got to realize that anything that even appears to be obvious, that all right, such and such information I have right now tells me that the weather today in the morning should be such and such, or the information I've got after all my years of study of economics tells me that the stock market our economy is going to do such and such. You take that as being a statement of some kind. You may take it as being a theory or a good hunch, but you take it as having a period somewhere that I have enough local information. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to take this and make a decision. To be an artist, to be a real intellectual explorer, you may or may not show any interest in what seems to be the local statement, the immediate statement of weather conditions, of the economic climate. You may or may not. Even if you do not, you recognize that it is making an indirect comment on other things. Something else, let me put it to you. I let Kyroots do one a while back recently. Any artist, let's consider inside of you, but any artist that's telling you what he's trying to do and telling you the meaning of his work does not know what he's doing, and his work is meaningless. That has some validity. It doesn't have any use that I know of out in the ordinary world, but it has validity out there. That anybody tells you what anybody's still telling you, especially an artist, but it's everybody else too. Another sidestep, but if you want to look at this, the institutionalization of life, any artist out there that's telling you what he's trying to do, while he's apparently engaged in his art, but he's still trying to tell you what he's doing. Like a running commentary, or he stops and he tells you, he goes out on, whatever it is, if he's still trying to tell you, that is anybody, what he's doing, he doesn't know what he's doing. Now, let us consider, of course, the left bank, Soho, inside of you, your own artist colony, your own section of your own nervous system. Any part of you that's still telling you what it's trying to do and telling you the meaning of what it's doing and what's going to be the significance once it gets through with this fine blank, this painting, this thought, this book, this decision. But it's having to tell you, it is. It's telling you still, all right, here's what I'm doing. It doesn't know what it's doing. Trust me. If you don't trust me, then consider your own life. I was going to get in there in a minute. I'll try to make some of you even see it. No more Mr. Nice Person. If you could see it, if you could remember it inside of your own chemistry, and you were doing it probably within the last few hours, if not minutes, of you, either to yourself, but look at it in a crude way, trying to tell somebody else what you're doing, in a sense, you still don't know what you're doing, or you wouldn't be telling them. Now, you may not be finished, but if you know what you're doing, you're not subject to turn around and say, oh, now, wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. It's not like you see it now. Now, this is not the finished product. What we're talking about actually something out there. If you know what you're doing, you do not have to give a running commentary on what you're doing. Conversely, and it's the way things are arranged. There's nothing at fault here. Nothing's amiss. But those artists, but everybody. But someone telling you, still telling you what they're doing, does not know really what they're doing. Which, of course, includes everybody. We've got to turn the tape over. Because there's a man who knows what he's doing. Let me drag some of this into the real everyday world. From people out in some of the other cities, and here I get notes and letters and questions, and there's been a new Reich, not in a pejorative sense, a new load of questions recently, and most of them tied around the questionnaires now finding some significance to my continue to talk about the dialogue. And the questions go like this. I'm going to put them all together and give you a paradigm of them. The questions go like this. Somebody will write me a paragraph, a page, 2 pages, but the questions end up like this. About how much they think they've gotten out of the idea of the dialogue and how they've looked at this and they've looked at that. But they now, at times, feel as though it's harder to make a decision. And sometimes they give me specific instances that they feel like that they want to make some great change in their life. And then they think, well, you know, that's pretty drastic. And my question, doctor, is this. The one doing the talking about, well, why don't we just shave our heads, quit our jobs, and go live in a cardboard box, live on rice, and think great thoughts. And something tells me, by God, that's the thing to do. And I don't know whether that's what part of the dialogue, because that sounds like a clear voice, and then another voice says, oh, come on. Well, all of you then should get your own grasp of that. It seems that now it's not just the ordinary run of ambiguity, of feeling indecisive whether I should do this or that, but they, with valid reason, think that having some idea and some of their own observation having to do with this dialogue and this continual running talk, and at times it seems like you're talking, and it sounds like you're listening, and it sounds like you're talking to yourself, and it sounds like you're listening to yourself, is then to think, this should give me some entree into an area wherein I could make more specific, satisfying decisions. But contraire, I feel just as confused or more, because now I look at it on the basis of the dialogue, but what I want to know is, when it's an idea that seems drastic to me, is it actually me, somebody doing the talking? Or is it something else talking and me listening? Because later I think, wait a minute, that sounded good for a minute, but hold on there. Does everybody follow the question? You know, which one should I be listening to? Who is the real talker in me and who is the listener? As another aside, before I get to that, some of you might care to pursue this little verbal picturization. As far as the dialogue, that noise endogenous to the human nervous system up in the area known as the brain, the east side. You could look at the dialogue as going like this. At one level, at a more basic level, you could look at the dialogue as life talking to itself. That life is the talker and life is the listener. Then you could look upon another kind of level. I don't take this as being some direct statement of a linear line of progress or otherwise, but another level, you could see the dialogue then is life makes you believe you're talking to yourself. That is, that you're both the talker and the listener. But if you could find a way to reach escape velocity from your home planet, to explore your own solar system a little more, to be an artist, then I would suggest that you might see it this way. To see that life is talking to itself through man and about man, making you believe that you're the talker and the listener, and by so doing, you have then reached a point, you discovered a way that you have begun to eavesdrop. I can hear some of you called it, but for the rest of you, I just want to be sure that you're not limited to anything I described when I said another side trip. There's all of that, and then it's like you've discovered how to just as big an organization as life is, one or two people around coming up beside the door and going, but you just about have to have all of that on your own personal information I described. I'll do it one more time. It's like, at one basic level, a good place to start. And of course, a good place to start is always a reasonable place to finish if you've got to. But is that the dialogue in you, in Einstein, in you Erasmus, in the Isley brothers, the dialogue is life itself talking to itself. that life itself is the talker and the listener. But then, another level of that is life has then made you, individual men, at a local level, believe that the dialogue is them, individually, you talking to yourself, and that you are both the talker and the listener. Then I said, somewhere outside the absolute G-force of your own planet, if you could get your intelligence away from that, is then you know that life is the great dialogue. It is talking to itself, and it's talking to itself through men, and it's talking, at least in part, the part you know, it's talking about men. But it's life talking to itself through you and about you, but while making you think it's you. Remember that? You got to know all of that, and once you know all of that, it's like then you find yourself, it hadn't changed it, and life hadn't suddenly thought, wait a minute, we got some fucker down there that done figured this out. It still goes on, and it's like you found a way to go back to the subject, right? Well, better that than a predicate. I can't deal with those predicates. The questions about how do I know which voice, how can I tell if I'm the talker or I'm the listener? Which voice should I be listening to? You know, should I be more confused than ever, and etc. You remember that? That's where I started this paragraph. Well, anybody can really ask that question. If they've got any notion of what they're asking, then I can give you a straightforward answer. Give you a way to absolutely look at it, and give you a way to deal with it. To think of acting and a way to act. And it's this, is do not ever seriously entertain, forget now about talker or listener, just a voice. The intellectual energy coming through you, an idea, a notion, a thought. And all the synonyms of thought. There aren't that many, are there? Mentation. Cerebral activity. Electrochemical firing range of the skull. Do not seriously entertain any voice, any idea in you that requires, that is, itself does it. It keeps a continuing commentary, a defense, or creates a debate about what it says. That's it. Now, that's not it for ordinary people, because for ordinary people, what I just said was just nonsense. It'd probably make Daffy Duck go, what? But if you are trying to actually put a new spin to your own neurochemical activity, is do not entertain, do not listen. You can just, of course you're going to hear it. It's going on. You can eavesdrop. But there is no question about should I follow this, or does that have any validity. All you got to do is be aware of this. I gave you 3 possible manifestations of that kind of voice internally, and it covers it all. If the idea, I'm calling it the voice, but if the idea comes to you that, you know what I should do? Sometimes I find myself throughout my life, I get so tied to material possessions, and I worry about my stamp collection. I worry about my hats and my clothing, and sometimes I really think it, and especially after reading that good book last night by that famous guru that says you ought to give everything away. You know the one, the guy with the 12 Rolls Royces and the helicopter. I really feel like I should just take everything I've got. I have no sense to burn it, but just go give it away to somebody that I can't get it back. Just go give it to Salvation Army or somebody, and just keep enough money in my pocket to go buy or rent a nice refrigerator cardboard box, that kind of thing. And just do that until I believe it'd be good for me. I just go live in the woods. I'll just go eat berries and wear berries or whatever. All right. If that idea must be, and it will do it itself, forget now about the talker or the listener, the idea So, we just get past who's talking and who's listening. The idea carries along with it. They cannot be separated. The idea carries with it a continuing commentary, comma. A debate creates a debate of some kind. That is, as you go, what? Forget whether it's you or the talker or the listener. Or it must defend the idea. Then any question about, well, is that me talking? Is that the talker in me? Or which side of the dialogue is that? It's the side of the dialogue to ignore. It's life talking to itself, universally. But it comes down to local level, and if that's the only intelligence you've got, life can be thinking to itself. And by the way, life could have thought this. I don't know whether any of you can follow this. Millions of years ago in our time, and it's just getting down to you. That is, life's already thought about it and went, nah. But it's getting down to you, and suddenly you feel as though, God, what an idea. I'll just give everything away in some way. It would, I don't know, it'd be a cleansing effect, or it would sharpen my intellect. I'd be better to do it. And life thought that one time, just when it was having a drink or something, and went, maybe I should do that. And then life went, nah. Or even life tried it and went, whoa there. And after it tried it, went, boy, what a bad idea. But now it's gotten down to a local level, and now you suddenly believe that I just thought of this. Of course, then you may think, well, wait a minute. Something tells me that's a grand idea, but is that just my imagination? Did I read that somewhere? Do I believe that I'm some kind of reincarnated Hindu or somebody that would do that kind of thing? Am I just overheated? Are my hormones, am I having hot flashes? There's no need to question anything. If the idea, that is the voice, has any idea of any kind, of course, as always, or most of the time, I try to push it to the point to sort of make your brain smile enough that I might be able to slip in something. But it can be quite serious affairs. But if the idea, if the voice and what it says creates debate, of course that should settle it for you, but I'm giving you at least a broader verbal range. But if it creates any debate, that is, the idea goes, hey, why don't we give away everything we got? And you don't go, God! And that's about it, maybe, and run out and do it. Then you got a debate going. If you go, that ain't a half bad idea, but you got a debate going. If the idea creates a debate, if the idea requires, when I say requires, it just goes along. It requires a continuing commentary. That is, even if you didn't debate it, if the voice says, why don't we give away everything we got and just try living with nothing for a while? And even if you don't go, wow, or wait a minute, let's say you don't debate it. Let's say that you just don't do anything. That apparently a talker in you says, let's give away everything we got. And the listener in you, in this case you might think it was you, sort of listens to it and doesn't really debate it right then. Are you home free? Not if the thing has to keep commenting on it. Like a little later says, did you think about it? Or, hey, did I tell you this, that I believe it might also have this benefit that I didn't mention? Are you really listening to me? Are you considering this? I think I've read some real famous, smart people in the past have done that. If it requires a commentary, if the voice does not say it, and the voice is satisfied, you've got an artist trying to tell you what he's up to, and he doesn't know what he's up to. He's trying to even tell you what's going to be the meaning of the work should you decide to purchase this work or get in there and help him chisel it or paint it. He's trying to tell you the meaning, and it ain't got no meaning. That's why you got to keep commenting on it. Or they have to defend it, which is, of course, you could look at it as being a corollary, a stepchild of the debate. But there's your answer. Now, I will grant you this will cut down severely on your pool of secondary alternatives. And you may have such a binding hobby right now, internally, of wanting to walk around and think, boy, I should do so-and-so. No. Yeah, boy, wouldn't that be great if I could? Yeah, but. Okay. But I might do. No, you don't want to do that. Yeah, I guess you're right. Now, that may be your hobby. If it makes you feel any better, that's almost everybody's, maybe not their foremost hobby, but it's at least their fifth most hobby. is doing that. But if you seriously, which I take the question seriously, and everybody's confronted with such as this, should I change jobs, or is this relationship just going to pieces, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of passionate limbic reaction that's like you're trying to think about a relationship with somebody. Should I do so and so? Well, yeah, but no. Any voice, any idea that carries with it, that requires a continuing commentary, or creates a debate, or sets up a defense, if you are a real explorer, if you are actually trying to get rid of useless material, forget about giving away your stamp collection, that ain't going to drag you down. You got stamp collections up here, you got little stamps that weigh, they weigh a lot. I didn't want to say tons because nobody'd believe it. They weigh a lot. Is you cannot pursue, or you should not, since some of you asked the question, you should not even entertain. There's nothing to question, there's nothing to think about, or should I do that? If it continues to comment, if it continues to tell you the idea, the voice, the artist continues to tell you what it's up to, it's not up to anything. And it's just a hobby. Now, if you want to sit there and babble with it, if you're so tied to the stake with such as that, and everybody is to some degree, it's like whistling the same damn song over and over and over and over until one day you realize, I'm about to drive myself crazy because I got to face up to it. I have whistled that fucking same, not even the song, those 3 bars of that song now for 37 years, 14 months, and such and such. If you want to escape that, which that's not the problem within itself either, because if it was, this thing would have a premise. And the premise would be, you're all driving yourself crazy, but thank God you found me. Now, if you're driving yourself crazy, you shouldn't thank God you found me, because if you were driving yourself crazy, all I'm going to do is, help you turn it into a short putt. Just a joke. But I guess if your intellect does have 18 holes, at least that kind of humor might help drive you away. At least let you see you don't belong here. But by the way, don't feel bad, because hell, I don't belong here. So where were we? Oh yeah. It's not that any of that per se is wrong, but if you're trying to find a way to escape some of that chatter, to quit babbling to yourself, and it's not, let me tell you one more time, it's not that in any way that's wrong. But those of you, and many of you may not find it wrong, but I'll tell you this, if you belong in this, and we'll assume you all do, if you do start cutting down on that, I get to give promises, but what the hell? I'm leaving town tomorrow, so it won't matter. If you do cut down on it, you'll like it. How's that? Probably. Conditionally speaking. You'll like it. And all you've got to do is just not take it seriously. Any voice, any idea that's got to continually comment on itself, or that in any way raises a debate. That is, that says something, and some debate, some discussion, a dialogue does start about this idea. The idea is a non-idea. It is an idea that has no primary significance to you. It may not to anyone, but it has significance, or life would not be having it run through people. But if you're going to try to stand there and create local reality, that here I stand in the middle of the Amazon, and where I stand, the water beneath my feet is mine. That's reality. If that's the extent of your grasp of this life, then so be it. But that is not how you stop reality. That is not how you expand what you understand. Put one more way. Looking at on the basis of these questions about the dialogue, about should you be listening to one voice or the other, how do you distinguish, since I brought it up and got some of you thinking about it, what is this dialogue? How do I know who's talking right now in my daydreams, or me talking to myself? Is that me talking, If it is, then who's listening? Or why do I then feel like it's switched over and now I don't know? That which I was suggesting that you would enjoy, you'd find it useful, profitable, is give heed, go with only those voices that can proceed chemically without endless babble. Which I was talking about in another context, if you remember, the last time we were taping. Not only is that unexpected, almost disruptive in the institutionalized living of life out here with ordinary people, of just saying yes or no, of not babbling, internally you're not used to it. That if, let's say it's the garbage that you can't have any particular effect on it now, the dialogue continues to go on. You were born, this radio's turned on, and it just keeps playing. But rather than you taking it seriously, not all of it, but you're periodically, or you would not be sane in the three-dimensional sense, parts of it you do take seriously. And of course you darn well should. That is, the serious parts. Which you and you alone can decide. But the serious parts, if they're serious in some real sense, in some more multidimensional sense, if they're serious, they do not babble. If the news comes on, and there was such a real news item as this, that a man says, or a woman says, a voice on this station that's been tuned in ever since you have been thinking, says, without any doubt, the world is coming to an end in 27 minutes. Now, if in some way that was a truly multidimensional statement of more universal reality, that announcer, I'm jumping back and forth from what seems to be out there in here now, that announcer would not come back on again, not even one more time, and say, all right, the world's coming to an end in 26 minutes. As long as they tell you that, you can ignore it. Anybody out there, in here, it's life thinking to itself. Or it's life remembering something it's already tried. And it could have been millions of years ago. But if there's a statement, if there's a piece of information coming, that the world, I was trying to pick something dramatic, the world is coming to an end in 27 minutes, Bunky. And it would be saying, sort of tacitly, I'm signing off. Tacitly, it would also be saying, that's the end of this news forever, because how are you going to follow that? I mean, if you're more Hollywood inclined and think, or vaudevillian inclined to think that it's hard to follow a kid's act or a dog act, as they used to say, try following that act. If a piece of information comes out and says, world is coming to an end in 27 minutes, wouldn't you, not you expect, now I pointed out, that that's going to be the end of the broadcast? I mean, maybe they'll throw on a record and have a musical interlude to see us all out. Well, what are you going to say after that? Are you going to come on and say, well, before that, we have some commercials here we'd like to wrap up since we've already been paid? They're going to tell you about a sale down at Autoland? They're going to tell you what the weather's going to be next Tuesday? The point being, if there was a piece of real information, unconditional, unadorned, if there was such a thing, it was possible for you to receive it under ordinary conditions, it would create no commentary. It would not be a babble. It would just simply go da ba 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 da 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 da. But that would be unnatural. In the same way that I was saying, those kinds of conversations, if they happen amongst ordinary people in life, you would find it to be off-putting. You'd feel like the tempo of things, the tune of the song. Somebody changed the song. They stopped in the middle of the chorus. The people do not talk yes and no. People simply do not say something and apparently mean that and only that, and do not comment on it any further. That they do not adorn it in some way. That they do not reach into their always present bag of adjectives and sometimes adverbs. So what if what I'm saying to you was a fair description? You would be trying to listen to, if they were there, to be perceptive to, any possible chemical voice that did not babble. That whatever it was, maybe not the end of the world, but somebody said, hey, do you want to do so-and-so? And your voice went, no. if you got to look at it this way, I'm still trying to respond to the general area of questions and interests that some of you had. That would be the voice to go with. That is, if it said no, and you don't have to wait for hours if you get good at this, you can hear it in the tone of voice. It'd be like the voice saying, the world's coming to an end in 27 minutes. If it said it the right way, you'd understand. You wouldn't keep listening to that radio and keep fooling with it and banging on it. You would hear in the tone of voice of that announcer that, that's it. I got nothing else to say. You can hear if somebody says, hey, let's go and see if we can take 72 10-milligram bennies without dying. I'm just trying to make up something. In your voice, one says no, and maybe another voice in you goes, oh God, I wonder if we could. Or another voice says, if I say no, all my friends are going to laugh at me. I know this is a crude example, but some of you are pretty crude at times. Whatever it was, if there seems to be a stimuli, an inducement, an inquiry, a question, a possibility presented to you from the external world, and a voice in you says, maybe one says maybe, one says let's think about it, let's discuss it, and then one voice says no. If you're wanting a kind of verbal response to those kind of answers, that is the one to go with. And it's not always a no. This is not a religion. It could be a yeah. And then it could be other voice and you go, wait a minute, I'm not going to do that. In other words, they say, hey, maybe you've never ridden a roller coaster in your life. And somebody says, now you are around people, and they'll say, let's ride the roller coaster. And a voice in you goes, yeah. And immediately, even better than that, coevally, voices start saying, no, no, no. And then voices start saying, what am I going to tell them? I've got diarrhea. I'm going to tell them, I just wrote it. I got to do something. And all these voices comment on what you've got to do. I can't let them know I'm afraid to ride. But if a voice, I'm trying to give you something other than a no, if the voice, one of your voices went, yeah, I'm not saying you got to, it's not going to be in the world, but if you want to know, a better way to use the dialogue, and just one voice went, yeah. Of course, in the kind of example I made up, that kind of voice wouldn't really say yeah, because we're getting closer to nonverbal areas. But when somebody said, and of course, if you're the kind afraid to ride a roller coaster, for instance, you've been walking around and you've been thinking about that all night. You just knew it was going to happen. So you've already had the dialogue going, you've already had the commentary going, you've already had the defense going, and suddenly, you've just written everything, the crowds, everybody's having fun, and you see it. There you are, part of this larger organism. That is, this crowd of you and 10 or 15 of your friends, and it keeps doing this, and they get closer, and sure enough, suddenly, it's like the whole organism just suddenly is there at the base. You know, this unbelievable roller coaster, and it's like suddenly this whole organism of you and your crowd goes, it's a roller coaster, let's ride it. It's like you too, like I hadn't thought about it. But you've had a dialogue. You have had a running commentary already, all night. But somewhere in you, a voice goes, no comment, doesn't debate it, it doesn't keep nudging you and saying, like the other voice would say about, hey, you can't do that, you can't do that. This one doesn't keep doing, do it, do it, do it. But it will, if you can hear it, just give a nice, simple, direct cut like with a scalpel. It will just, yeah. A real explorer does not listen to babble. How could you listen to babble? Whether it's your own, whether it's somebody else's. If you're actually going to sail away, and you got the financing, and Ferdinand and Isabel, Godspeed, and you're on the boat, or you're there at the dock, trying to find new worlds. Either that, or some way you have gotten the, what was it, Starship Enterprise. You got it taken over, and you're there, sitting in the captain's chair. Are you going to entertain babble? That there are all kinds of people standing there on the dock hollering, if you head out due west, you're for damn sure going to go, and other people hollering, wait, go out a little west, and then hang a right when you get just out of sight, because we've heard, some of us, our grandfathers and people were up north, and they've heard that some of those Nordic, those wild men, found a place up there you got to take a right. I guess that'd be north, right? And they all babble. Everybody's got suggestions. If indeed you were a tropical Christopher Columbus, and you had gotten to the point that you're about to actually embark somewhere, do you hear me? Would you entertain babble? You're the one that got things arranged. You're the ones that got the financing. You're the ones you may, as it turned out in some cases back then, you may end up, I shouldn't give you the blues. You're the one that arranged things up to that point. Why would you then, if you were a reasonable, even three-dimensional explorer, entertain the babble, that is everybody else's suggestions, their debate, their warnings? You know, if they knew anything, they'd be there on the damn boat. They'd be the ones arranging it. You have the Bay of... Where do you sail from? Someday I'll remember, won't I? In the Mediterranean somewhere. See, big moves cover small losses. It was in the Mediterranean somewhere. I took care of that. Why would you entertain at all any babble in you of trying to sail away from your own locale, the hold on your own limited intelligence, everything that seems to be annoying? Why would you listen to babble? Because anything that is babbling does not know what it's doing. And I don't care what the voice seems to be speaking of. It seems to be using philosophical, scientific, your own homemade terminologies and idioms. If it continues to babble about whatever it is, continues to tell you what it's doing, what it's up to, if it's comments, if it's a running commentary on what it's doing, it doesn't know what it's doing. That's not absolutely true, but three-dimensionally that is valid. Why would you listen to it? Anything that's babbling, ignore it as best you can. You can't necessarily shut it up right now, but at least you can ignore it. You've got to, of course, be able to recognize babble. You're in bad shape if you still continue to oftentimes hear babble and think, wait a minute, I got to write this down. I wish I had my little tape recorder. This is important shit. It's babble. Oh, wait a minute, I got to remember. Boy, what a thought I just had. How much time we got? 10. I got 10 minutes worth of stuff. Hell, I got 10 lifetimes worth of material. I know we're about 10 minutes. Just think about having access to this kind of material. It's not like you're in partnership with some playwright that's going to run dry finally. I think we'll stop for the night. Although I could talk about another phenomenon. I shouldn't even tell you the name of that one, though. And after that, I could have wrapped it up and showed you how that was connected, albeit in a multidimensional fashion, with where I started from. It's not at all, even though you might find some allusion, but it is not specifically as Con Edison would have the old stove roundup where you trade in your range. It's always good sometimes to leave on a real tenuous and sketchy note. At least some of you think, well, I really got something tonight. I really heard that. It was good and down to earth. I was going to leave you with at least a final philosophical comment from John Lee Hooker, but I guess it was sketchy enough already, wasn't it? Good night to you all.